It's funny, isn't it? Look at what is capable under Disney's Star Wars. And yet, what have we had? This, that, and eventually this. But don't worry, kids, Star Wars The Mandalorian has come out finally. Yay. And you know what? This is probably the first time I've not shat on a Star Wars product in fucking hell, how many years? But it's a breath of fresh air, to be quite frank. It's not bad. I'll go as far as to say it's rather good. Not perfect, not amazing, but very good. I'm not gonna get my hopes up because it's the first episode, it's the pilot. It is just setting up what is to come after all. But from what I've seen, it looks rather promising. I hope this continues. We long-time Star Wars fans deserve some good content once in a while, don't we? I'll say this now, don't expect Season 1, Episode 1 of Game of Thrones level of material here, it's not like that. But I do have high hopes for this one. But first, how I do things. Now, seeing as I'm a new YouTuber, I'm going to try out a new format for me, as far as I know. It might be used by someone else, but I'm going to separate this video into two parts. The first one will be scraping the surface so that I can give you a spoiler-free review, and obviously the second one will have spoilers in it. I will have timestamps in the description for you, as well as shown on the screen for you. Let's get into it. So, spoiler-free. Now, I'll start with the overall plot. The overall plot is very simple. The Mandalorian, I'll call him Oberyn Martell, because Pedro Pascal. Oberyn picks up target. Oberyn delivers target. Oberyn can no longer take jobs for the guild because they're all taken, and he goes to take a private one, which pays more. And yes, he finds the target. That's the episode, pretty much. Without me delving too much into the plot, and spoiling it for you at least, but it's very simple to the point where even if I was to tell you it, it wouldn't really spoil that much, apart from the end. I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But overall, the plot, I say, is because it's the first episode and there's not much that they can mess up. I'll give it a 2.5 out of 3. Following on from that, writing quality is pretty much the same, 2.5. Like, there's not much that they can mess up, but there's nothing to grip me that makes it into a 3. Now, when it comes to characters, there's not that much to work with either. I can't say there's any bad characters, but I can't say there's any amazing characters either. I mean, the characters are just characters at the moment. We don't know any of them. And even Oberyn, he's just the Mandalorian now. We don't have a name yet. We haven't seen his face yet. There's not much to work with. But there are other characters, like the bloke who says,
"Bounty hunting is a complicated profession,"
who do show us some sort of character, and I imagine we'll probably see characters like that again. There's also another Mandalorian character introduced in the show, and I'm sure we'll get more background on her. The same can be said for the IG series unit that was seen in the trailer, and another character that helps Oberyn later on. But despite this, you still get personality from all these characters, so, you know. 2.5. Now, guess who's directing this episode? Yes, the man, the myth, the legend, Dave Filoni, the man behind the Clone Wars, and the backbone behind Rebels. Ironically, both of these shows featured Mandalorians pretty heavily. And guess what? Jon Favreau, who's the main guy on this show, was also one of the main Mandalorian characters in the Clone Wars pre-Vizsla, so there's that for a little bit of nostalgia and background for you. You're welcome. So yeah, acting and directing quality was pretty high level, but there's just not much to work with that makes it groundbreaking, so I can't really fault it either. I mean, the acting still is on point with all the alien species that we saw, whose faces we saw, the voice acting, even Oberyn Martell's voice. But, you know, I guess we'll find out more later, so I'll keep this as a 3, and I will measure it out with the rest of the episodes. Cinematography, visuals, and art style. Now, 2.5, I'll explain why. Now, as expected with a Disney project, it is shot amazingly well. Very well. The visual aesthetics look very pleasing. The planets visited look very dull, and it's meant to look very dull, so I'm not going to scrutinize it on that. But overall, it just looks very beautiful. I mean, if you look at the cinematic shots in the credit scenes, you get to see the kind of look that they were going for, and they replicated it amazingly well. CGI and special effects included. Good on them. Sound quality was pretty, well, phenomenal. I mean, it's one thing you can just love about Star Wars is when it comes to the sound, it just sounds great everywhere. From blaster sounds to ship sounds, it just sounds phenomenal. The animal sounds, the alien sounds. I mean, there was this Quarren that doesn't sound like any Quarren I've ever heard, even from the Clone Wars. but it sounded interesting. So, yeah, sound quality is a 3. Immersion and world building also gets the 3, and I'll tell you why. Following on from what I said earlier, you get the idea that it's meant to look this dull. The 2 planets featured are barren, much like Tatooine was. They are near empty, are dangerous places. They're like an old western film, very dangerous, everyone's on edge, everyone's got their blasters at the ready. There are also nods to legends that will bring a lot of immersion in. I mean, the main metal that they're talking about throughout the episode, I'm not going to say a name, is a key fundamental part of Mandalorian culture. And then there's also a character who actually tells Oberyn about Mandalorian culture and a creature that they used to ride. So, you know, you just feel a lot more immersed in it. I keep using immersed, but that's the word I can only come up with right now. So, yeah, 3. And here's the thing that pains me the most, and it pains me so much because it's my specialty, the musical score. Why, oh why did they go for this industry standard Disney soundtrack? I will never know. It sounds basic. Just middle of the road, basic. Like, it's not groundbreaking. It's not bad, but it's not groundbreaking. It's not good. It's just average. And that bugs me. Don't get me wrong, it sounds nice. The quality is great. It was mastered well, mixed well. Instruments are good. I do like the electronic synths in it. But it just, you're going to hear this a lot from probably other YouTubers who are making videos at this moment as well, but it just doesn't sound like Star Wars. It just sounds like a generic sci-fi film. And now I just googled who the composer is, and it's Ludwig Göransson, who's some Swedish guy who worked with Donald Glover on some things, so he's got talent, but it's just, I don't know what they were thinking with the soundtrack. Like, maybe this was Jon Favreau's decision to get him in it. I mean, I'm sure he has a lot of, you know, good skills, but his creative choice with the soundtrack just sounds bizarre to me. I don't know. I mean, in fairness, that was everyone's sentiment with the Clone Wars as well back in the day. And Rebels, for that matter. The soundtracks in Rebels weren't that great either. But in the Clone Wars, it sounds off kind of electronic, but then it got more Star Wars-y, more like John Williams' score. So here's hoping for that, but at the moment, the score's just basic for me. Industry standard Disney, a 1.5. Now onto something a little more subjective, but can still be measured. Enjoyment. I did enjoy it, and I do think that other people will enjoy this too. I'll tell you why. The pacing is good. I mean, I have another gripe, and that's why it's a 2.5 for enjoyment. It's like 40 minutes long. Now, most 1 hour long shows are like 50 minutes at least, but this one was 43, and that's including the credits. But I didn't feel bored, so there's that. The pacing's pretty decent, and I very much did enjoy there was this one scene with the IG series droid and obviously our good old friend Oberyn Martell. And you know how you've probably seen it in the Clone Wars or Rebels or even the normal Star Wars films, I believe, where someone's opened a hole through a door and then opened it. Well, it's like that in this, but with blasters. And I won't spoil too much of it until I'll say it later. You'll see. But I enjoyed that, so it is fun. You will get some kicks out of it. The gunfights are very good. No lightsabers, so don't expect it. It's not that type of Star Wars show. And that leads us to rewatch value. Now, this is a pilot, an establishing episode, if you will. Maybe pilot's too harsh. And it ends on an interesting note, and I will get to that. So, I'll leave that as a 2. Rewatch value's a 2. I'm going to watch it a third time once I finish this review. But I don't see anyone watching this episode like 10 times in a row because it was so amazing, and oh my god, this and that, and this and that, you know? So, yeah. But overall, that makes it a 25 out of 30, or an 8.33, whatever the fuck, how many 3s there are. So 8.3 out of 10. Now, let's get into the plot. And I'm going to go through what actually happens with you, and then I'm going to tell you what actually is going on and what they're possibly setting up. Because I was very interested, especially by the end. Oberyn is searching for something, he's following some sort of tracking device. And eventually, he leads into a cantina. Now, you'll get loads of Mos Eisley cantina flashbacks when you watch this scene. In fact, the parallels are strong with this one. Only this time, there's no lightsaber, there's only a blaster, a grappling hook, and a door. You've seen it in the trailer, you know what's going to happen. So basically, two humans and some deep voice quarren are trying to take the glands off of this blue bloke, and they try to pick on the Mandalorian, our good old friend Oberyn Martell. And you know, he has his helmet this time. So he kills them. Yeah, good old Oberyn Martell. Now Oberyn goes towards this guy, he's some blue type of alien creature, and the alien creature tries to give him money, but it turns out that Oberyn has been sent to pick him up for a bounty, which he does. He takes him to some sort of space taxi on a speeder, and yeah, he space Ubers it to his ship. And guess what creature is the guy who's in charge of the Uber service? Yeah, it's one of those Imperial spy guys that goes like this. I guess they're all out of work now, aren't they? I mean, it makes sense. This is set 5 years after the fall of the Empire, which is, what, 9 ABY, isn't it? Which is like 28 years after the Clone Wars. So, yeah, these guys are out of work, you know. They got to scrounge, they got to make their own money somehow, and I guess space super is the way to do it. So yeah, there's that. Oberyn seems to be racist towards droids. I mean, why not, right? And he ends up getting a human driver in a less adequate vehicle, but it's human, and I guess he trusts people more than droids, I guess. Maybe he has some PTSD with droids. We'll probably get some more life lessons about that. Or maybe there's a reason for that, because in the future he has some sort of flashbacks to when he was a kid and he was being hidden by his parents. Maybe he was alive during the Clone Wars, you never know. But anyway, his Uber driver takes him towards this ship, and the guy warns him, saying that the ice, he shouldn't stay on it for long. And what do you know it, some sort of space hippopotamus attacks the ship. And yeah, he goes outside the ship to tase the creature and it falls off. So yeah, there's that, I guess. Now eventually they fly away. So this is Oberyn and the target, the blue bloke. And eventually the blue bloke needs to go to the toilet. Now he's trying to talk to him, he's asking him weird questions about, is it true you never take off your helmets and stuff like that? And then he goes to take, you know, a little piss, because that's what you do. I mean, ever since Rebels now introducing toilets, there are now going to be more toilets in Star Wars now. Yay, thank you Disney, woo. But eventually blue bloke finds the gun storage. Now he eventually closes it because he's a pussy, and then he starts to explore the bottom of the ship, and then he sees that there are a couple people frozen in carbonite, and then out of nowhere, Oberyn comes out of nowhere and he shouts, "You raped her! You murdered her! You killed her children!" and then throws him into the machine to be frozen in carbonite. So yeah, end of Act 1. After this, Oberyn arrives in Mandalore, well, what I believe to be Mandalore, it might be a different place, but it looks like Mandalore, and he lands. He walks into the guild and then comes up to the guild master and gives him the keys for the frozen carbonite prisoners. And then we get some more backstory, which adds into immersion, because immersion and storytelling and world building are so important nowadays. And what the guild master does is he gives Oberyn some Imperial credits. Now, obviously, Imperial credits are not valid that much anymore. I mean, they're still accepted by most people, but the Empire is no more. And then he brings out some Mon Cala currency. And if you don't know what the Mon Cala are, they are a species. Think of Admiral Akbar. He's part of that species. I believe it was called Mon Calamari Flan. Interesting name. But yeah, that's a new currency. It looks kind of weird and slodgy. And it's interesting that there are more currencies being added in, so you get to see this kind of black market side to Star Wars and the more mature side. And I do like that. There are more than Imperial and, well, Republic credits if you're watching the Clone Wars, so it's good to see that. Now, after some back and forward about new contracts and how they're all being taken and how they're not paying that much, Oberyn decides to take a more unorthodox one, where he has to actually go meet the contact in person to discuss the contract. So he eventually goes off, because it pays well, unlike the others, and he needs money because apparently they can't pay for fuel with these mundane small jobs. Now Oberyn goes off to meet the contact, and it's in some hidden alleyway. He knocks on the door, and one of those weird eye things that looks like it's been held by someone behind the wall comes out, looks at him, and then comes back in, the door opens, and he walks in, and he sees a bunch of muddy stormtroopers. I see about 4, I believe it was. And then this bloke sitting down, and this is the guy that says,
"Bounty hunting is a complicated profession."
Now, he could either be some dormant Imperial officer or something, or he could be a Mandalorian because he talks to Oberyn about a lot of Mandalorian stuff in it, which is interesting. In fact, he gives him some sort of metal, a Mandalorian metal, Beskar iron. Now, anyone who's very familiar with Legends will know a lot about this. But this is essentially the metal that is used to create the Mandalorian armor. And apparently this bloke has more, seeing as this is just a down payment to get him in the game. You also learn that Oberyn is the best bounty hunter in the Parsec, I believe he said. So that's more world building for you. So yeah, Oberyn is sent to go and capture a 50-year-old in some planet. And he accepts. So, what's the first thing that Oberyn does? Does he go to the mission? Go for a drink? Go to shoot some womp rats? Not at all. He goes and gets the iron melted down and adds it to his shoulder. In this particular scene, not only do you see that there are other Mandalorians, but you also see those flashbacks I mentioned earlier. He dreams of his parents hiding him whilst they're under blaster fire. And the subsequent flashbacks are also timed with the metal bangs that the female Mandalorian does when she's hammering the metal into place. It's very interesting the way they did that. Harkens back to what I said about the sound quality, it is phenomenal. Speaking of the Mandalorian woman, she also mentions that this is a tribe, which is very interesting. I remember her asking Oberyn if something was revealed or something, and that a pauldron should be in order, and that's the thing that goes on his shoulder. On top of this, the Mandalorian woman also mentions that this piece of metal was taken during the Great Purge. I'm pretty sure this is a Jedi Purge that she's talking about, so more background for you. Could this link back to the Mandalorian arcs in both Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels? I mean, you never know. But I'll say this one thing, I'm going to bring Game of Thrones again. Funny enough that I'm talking about Oberyn Martell. I don't know if you remember this scene, if you ever saw Game of Thrones, but there's a scene where Tywin Lannister is breaking down, spoiler alert, the great sword that belonged to House Stark, and obviously gives one to Jaime Lannister and the other one to his grandson, Joffrey Baratheon, or Lannister if you're me. But I thought it would be nice to point out that scene, and how it's essentially you breaking down something old and moulding it into something new to represent something new, or in this case, Mandalorian culture. It's very nice. I mean, in this universe, the Mandalorian armor is essentially like a house's greatsword in Game of Thrones. So I do like the fact that that's been explored in this show. So yeah, harkens back to my world building thing and how we got 3. Now, next act. Legit, as soon as he lands, he gets attacked by some sort of giant-faced creature. I believe it's called a Blurg, I think? I mean, they just come up with the dumbest names. I mean, first a Porg and now a Blurg. But yeah, he's attacked by one of these Blurgs and then it gets darted or something. And then a second one comes out of nowhere and that also gets darted. And it turns out some Ugnaught emerges and saves him. I mean, you remember those small kind of pig-like alien things on Bespin? Yeah, one of those things are there, and it's smart and not some sort of worker. So, more alien creatures that are doing things. I like that. I like that a lot. But this Ugnaught ends up telling him about other bounty hunters having come to that area and none of them returning, and how he believes that this Mandalorian is the one having known about the Mandalorians and their culture and the way of life, and how they used to ride these types of creatures. I can't remember what the hell they were called. Mythosaur, I think it's called. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, eventually he starts riding the same things that tried to kill him and nearly bit his arm off, and the two of them travel to the location, and yeah, the Mandalorian's about to plan his attack or his stealth insurgent, and then out of nowhere, an IG series droid emerges. And then just starts spraying up the place. Now, this isn't the IG-88 droid that everyone knows and loves. This is a new character as a whole. Yes, I googled it. Kind of got my hopes up for that. But eventually, Oberyn tries to make him stand down, and then obviously he shoots him because he's like, surprise, and then just, yeah, just like that. But his armor, being Mandalorian Beskar armor, saves him. And eventually they all recognize they're in the same guild, and then they team up and go against the horde of whatever creatures. Some of the mercenaries are Weekrey, some of them are Duro. You see a few other types of species I can't remember the names of. But obviously the majority of them get taken down by IG-11 and Oberyn. However, they then get pinned down, especially by an E-Web turret that just emerges, and it just starts spraying them. So Oberyn has IG-11 go out and draw the fire, and then he goes and takes over the gun, and then sprays the rest of them to smithereens. So yeah, bang bang. Nice little gunfight, and I must say this gunfight was well done. Some of the kills were bloody hilarious, some of them were badass. Some of them felt a bit contrived, but I can allow it. I kind of knew nothing was going to happen to the main character in the first bloody episode, or the IG series droid, but, you know, it was well done, I got to say. They really did make these two look badass. And I sensed Dave Filoni had something to do with that. He was always good at making characters look badass. Now, as I said before, they broke down the door using the E-Web turret, as most people would have used the lightsaber back in the day to cut open the door. And they find a life form, well, after killing someone who was hiding and waiting for them. And this life form ends up being the same species as Yoda and Yaddle. It seems like the Hutts, Yoda's species, ages rather slow. I mean, it makes sense. The Hutts can last up to a couple thousand years. Yoda's species, as far as we know, can live up to 1,000 or just under 1,950, was it? Or was it more than that? I can't remember. But this means that we could potentially get an origin of Yoda's species, what planet they come from, what their actual name is. Here's hoping. But obviously, all good things must come to an end. IG-11 decides he wants to take out the target, because for some reason this IG unit doesn't like more money. And whether it be sentiment or the fact that he wants the money, Oberyn decides to deactivate IG-11 permanently, which is kind of sad. I had high hopes that these two would end up being partners for at least a season or something. I guess he's used to being alone, and he already has said he doesn't like droids. Indirectly. So, yeah, we don't know yet because his helmet covers his bloody face, but he saves this youngling, and I guess we'll find what happens in the next episode, because it ends right after that. So yeah, I have to say, I really do have high hopes for this series. Despite not showing the face of the main character, I can still sympathize with him, even from the small actions like tilting heads and stuff. It still immerses me. I mean, I'm still not sure if this is Pedro Pascal or some stuntman that they've got wearing the armor, but regardless, it works. And this episode does really well to set up what is to come. But I won't get my hopes too high, like super high. High is fine, but not super high, because they could mess it up. They could inject some sort of political agendas into it. I mean, anything's possible. It's Disney. But I guess we'll have to wait and see, won't we? I really do hope that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni can save Star Wars as a whole. I mean, let's face it, we know this last trilogy film is going to not do well. Let's be quite honest. But maybe with this, and eventually the Clone Wars, something good will come out of it. I'll see you next episode. May the Force be with you. Always.